now we're going to be working on the understitch. And the understitch, we want to have the stitch inside of the garment. This is just the inside, and then we have the outside. And then we're going to put the two pieces together, good side to good side. This is our good side and good side. And then we're going to follow that curve like we did. Making sure everything's aligned correctly. And then at a 1/2 inch, we're gonna insert the item. We're gonna put our needle down. We're gonna do a few stitches, and then we're gonna back tack. And then we're gonna make sure that we're following this 1/2 inch line. So we're gonna go, and there's a curve, so we have to pivot. So we're gonna make sure that our needle's down, and we're gonna lift up our foot, and we're gonna move it over so we're following that 1/2 inch line. And then you're gonna put your foot back down and continue sewing. It's starting to curve again, so I'm gonna put my needle back down, and I'm gonna move it over, put it down, and I'm gonna keep going again. And then I'm gonna do the same thing because I wanna follow that line. And then I'm also want to make sure that these pieces are aligned because you don't want it to move on yourself. I'm gonna move it back up, and I'm gonna hold it with my fingers, and then I'm gonna keep going. Then I'm gonna lift again, move it over to follow that line. Do it again. And then when I get towards the end, I'm gonna back tack and release. And then now I'm going to cut triangles all around the bottom, press it, and then I'll show you how to do the understitch. So when you're cutting the triangles, you want to make sure that you're not going to cut the thread that we just sewn. So you want to get as close as you can, but not cut it. You're going to do that all the way around. So once you're done doing the triangles, it will look like this. Then I'm going to go to the iron and press it open, and then I'll show you how to do the understitch. Okay, so now that we've done pressing it, we're going to do the understitch. And the understitch is we want to get a line, sew a line that goes around the inside part of our fabric and not show it on the outside. So the way to do that is you're going to open up your garment, and the little triangle seams that we cut out, we want to face it towards the inside part of the garment. So I'm going to push those triangles over with my fingers. So now we're going to insert our garment. We're going to open it up. So I'm going to put it inside. And then I'm going to make sure that I'm going to sew not on this line here, but over about a quarter, because we want to sew these triangles down so they're not flopping around everywhere. So I'm shifted my seam towards the side, and then I'm going to sew down here about a 1/4 inch over. So I have my foot down, and I'm going to sew a little bit. Then I'm going to back tack. Once I'm done back tacking, I'm making sure that the triangles with my finger are facing towards the inside part where we want. And then I am always just adjusting those triangles to go towards the inside part of the garment. So I'm moving it towards about a 1/2 inch over, making sure my triangles are on the other side. Moving them over, sewing them down. With those cuts, it's going to help you with the curve better. But if you still need to pivot, you can go ahead and put your needle down and then adjust your foot if you need to. But for the most part, because we made those triangle cuts, you are not going to have to do that. And then you're going just to sew it, making sure that your triangles are facing the correct way, all the way towards the end. When you get to the end, we're going to back tack. And it's going to look like this. So we have the seam now on the inside, and when we flip it over towards the outside, you do not see a seam. This on the inside will help this prevent it from rolling up when you're wearing the item, and then it'll look nice and clean on the outside. So now I'm going to show you how to sew an inner curve, and then when we're done sewing this curve, I'm going to show you how to do a top stitch on it. So we're going to get our two pieces that we cut out, making sure that everything is aligned correctly. So make sure that this lines up. Then we're going to put it on the sewing machine at a 1/2 inch. So you're going to move it over to 1/2. You're going to put your foot down, and then you're going to put your needle down, and you're going to sew a few stitches, then do a back stitch. So do a few, then back. And then you're going to follow that curve on the 1/2 inch line all the way to the end. So you're going to follow that curve. If you need a pivot, you put your needle down, and then you're going to release your foot, and you're going to move it a little bit like this. So you can follow that curve all the way to the end. So I'm going to move my curve to follow that 1/2 inch line all the way. I'm going to put my needle down. I'm going to move it again. So I'm following that 1/2 inch line. And on this curve, you're going to do that a few times. You're going to lift it up. You're going to shift it over. Put it down. Every time you shift, make sure your needle is fully down before you release it with your foot. And you also want to make sure that your pieces are even and lined up together. So don't let them move around. And I'm following that line all the way to the bottom. And when I get to the end, I'm going to back stitch again and release my foot. So then you have this curve here. Okay, so now that we're done sewing the curve, we're going to work on the top stitch. And the way that we're going to work on this top stitch is, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to snip the inner curve here. And when we open it, it'll give us an easier method to do the sewing on top. So you're going to make little triangles. You're not going to cut directly on the seam. You're going to cut a little bit below that seam. So I'm going to cut heading towards it and just snipping it like so. Little triangles. All the way around the curve. Make sure you do not snip off that seam, because then you have to start all over again. But try to get as close to the seam as possible. So once you're done cutting it, it should look like this. But now you're going to flip it over. And you're going to press this seam down towards one side. So I'm going to press all this curve all towards one side here. So when you are going to sew a top stitch, you have to know that the top stitch has to be on the outside of the fabric. If this is the outside of the dress, your top stitch is going to be on the outer side. And then this side is the inside, the one that's against your body, and then you will not have a seam there. The way to just have a seam on the outside of your garment is you're going to open up your two pieces, and we trimmed the inside like so. It let us press down the curve nicely. Open it up, and on the outside part of the seam, we're going to face the seams that are in the inside towards the outside. So we're going to push all these little triangles towards the outside part of the garment. You want to sew a top stitch on 1/4 away from the seam here. So we're going to be sewing down the triangles here all the way around. I'm going to put my garment inside, making sure that the triangles are facing the outside, and I'm going to move it over about 1/4. I'm not sewing on the seam like stitch in the ditch. I'm sewing over like 1/4 to hold those triangles down. I'm going to put my needle down, and I'm going to sew a little bit, then I'm going to back stitch. And then the whole way, I'm going to make sure that those triangles are held down. And you can flip it over to the other side, making sure that you move up those triangles to the outer side. And you're just going to sew it. And the whole way, you're going to be moving it with your fingers and feeling with your fingers. So making sure that those triangles are getting sewn down on the outside of the fabric. I'm always adjusting, making sure my triangles are getting sewn down, making sure that they're moved to the outside of the garment. Then when you get to the end, you're going to back tack, and then you're going to release. So once you're done, your stitch will look like this. Your stitch is sewn and seen on only the outside part of your garment. If you flip it over on the inside, you will not see the seam. This is your top stitch. A lot of top stitches are for bags, pants, jeans have those lines on the outside. It's more decorative purposes, and then on the inside it's more like structural, like you use it to hold the items down. It doesn't roll up on you. This is also for it to not to roll up on you, but for like thicker items like accessories, like bags, because like on the outside the purse needs to be like really thick and everything needs to be held down on the outside. It doesn't come out. But it's just like preference, honestly. But this just doesn't look nice like on clothing, but this will probably look nice on like upholstery. And then here is, of course, the inside to have it down, because when you wear it and even when you wash it, everything starts curling up and then you have to press it. So then it's better to have the inside.